Hello, welcome to an addendum to the Short Story Sundays series that I've been running on my channel for a little over the first half of the year, the first 7 months of the year, comprising a total of, 15 episodes or something like that? I'm going to go ahead and double check because I have no reason not to. It looks like 15 episodes of Short Story Sundays, a short-lived series for my channel. I just want to make this video as kind of a more relaxed, sort of casual one to kind of explain some of the reasons why I decided to discontinue the series, and maybe some of the reasons why I decided to do it in the first place, and to say that I enjoyed making the series and I'm glad I did it, but that I need to move on from it. Now, for something running so short, it seems kind of weird for me to make such a big point about needing to discontinue it, but I kind of realized relatively recently, it was while I was working on the very last episode of it, that I basically discovered, yeah, I need to discontinue the series. I'm not getting enough fulfillment from it, is like the long story short version of it. And then it was while I was actually editing the video for the last one that I decided, no, this is just going to discontinue now instead of 2025, when I sort of originally planned to continue it through. So it's a little bit of a longer story, and I don't know how long this video is going to take, so I apologize if it gets a little rambly. I don't have notes, I don't have a script or anything to refer to, and I'm probably going to miss or forget several of the points that I remember initially, like, talking to myself about probably about a month ago, when I was like, okay, yeah, what are the reasons that I'm doing this for? What are the justifications for this decision, and running them through my head. So if I miss anything, maybe I'll include it in the edit of this video if it comes to mind. If not, I might occasionally put things into a comment that I'll pin on this if there's extra reasons or something like that. So let's kind of start from the beginning here. I talk about the inception of Short Story Sundays. What was the reason I decided to do this in the first place? Well, in order to get more videos out on my channel, this was something that I wanted to be able to do. Come 2023, I started doing 2 episodes of the book binge instead of 1 every week, and then had the Fortnite on the Isle every other week, every other Sunday, an update video sort of thing going on. So I had 2 videos every week at least, sometimes 3. Every other week I would have 3 videos a week, and then, you know, the monthly wrap-up type of stuff would happen, and occasionally I'd have 4 videos in a week. I wanted to be able to make this a little bit more consistent and have 3 videos every single week on the channel in 2024 as a sort of thought experiment type of thing, to see kind of what that does for the channel analytically, and in terms of, you know, kind of like pushing it out there, because consistent video releases and having multiple videos every week actually really helps with pushing a channel in the algorithm. So from a production angle, I was just kind of interested to see what I could do with getting 3 videos every single week rather than 2 to 3 to 2 to 3 every week. So it was just kind of a thought experiment in my head. I was like, okay, well, what would I do on the other Sundays? Would I do an extra book binge episode? I don't really know, because I actually, for a very long time, until very recently, didn't have enough book binge video ideas to even really do 2 of those every single week. And I kind of have a couple of lesser quality videos because I had to come up with something, or did a lot of top X number of books in whatever genre that I want to read videos, as opposed to like top favorites, because I haven't read enough books. I don't read fast enough to make top favorite lists very often, and I haven't really made any of those at all yet, because I just feel like I haven't read enough to really justify it in most cases. And so basically Tuesdays became basically just review days for the most part. The first Tuesday of every month is still my monthly reading wrap-up and TBR video. The other Tuesdays, I generally try to do book reviews, except for when I'm reading, say, a Wheel of Time book or something like that, and therefore doing reading diaries on the Thursday episodes, so not book binge specific, but still like those types of videos on Thursdays, and therefore some other special stuff would occasionally come in and fill in gaps on Tuesdays if I didn't have enough reviews to fill out basically every Tuesday of the year. Like, I don't read, in order to do a review every single Tuesday that needs a review, hypothetically speaking, outside of the monthly reading wrap-up and TBR videos, I need approximately 35, 36 books a year to review, and that's, believe it or not, actually kind of tough for me. I read pretty slowly. It's only been this year that I've really kind of been able to exceed that. The last couple years I read about 44 books each year, and that's if you include like short story collections as books and, you know, some other random jargon nonsense going on in there. This year I've definitely read a little bit more than that so far. I don't know the actual count that I'm at this year, but the main point is to read enough books to be able to review every single week is hard enough as is. To have a second book binge video every single week to come out, I mean, need plenty of material that isn't necessarily book reviews to kind of fill in that space, if that makes sense. So filling in the gaps on Sundays, that every other week that isn't comprised of a bi-weekly update video, making those extra book binge videos didn't really make sense in my mind, so I didn't go that route. So then I thought of some extra, you know, catchy titles or alliterative titles for video series, stuff like Short Story Sundays as an example. I'm like, okay, that actually sounds like an interesting idea. What would I do there? That was one of the ideas that I come up with. There were some others that I came up with as well that I don't need to say here because maybe I'll still kind of do something with those as exploratory things to do later, but I don't quite know yet. The point is, Short Story Sundays was one of these ideas that I came up with, and originally I was thinking, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? Well, if the stories are short enough, what if I read the stories and then talked about it a little bit? And that would be kind of the format, and that would be a unique sort of format, because otherwise I'm just doing, you know, spoiler-free reviews is what 99% of the reviews on my channel are. So what if I did something different along those lines and read the story? But then I was like, okay, well, that would actually take a lot of extra time, because just reading the story offhand, if I hadn't ever read the story before, and then talking about it is pretty difficult to do, actually, because you're reading the story out loud while also trying to comprehend it, and for me that's a little bit harder to do. Doing those things simultaneously is really exhausting, and so it would also make the videos very, very long. Even the shorter short stories, only like 2,000-3,000 words, those videos would end up being 20-30 minutes long, depending on how quickly I could read them, because again, I'm a slow reader, and I'm also trying to be pretty methodical when reading out loud. When reading out loud as well, I also tend to get tongue-tied a little bit more often, and therefore I'm having to correct myself. I know this because of reading scripts for videos, most especially on the second channel at this point. And for, just as an example, a 5,500 word blog that I've written, that would be the Orbit Culture discography ranking in this specific example on the second channel, is about 35 minutes long, if I'm not mistaken. So your average short story length of some of the stuff that I'd be checking out and reading for the channel is stuff that would take me up to an hour of video length just straight up for the reading alone, depending on how long they get. Some of the stories that I wanted to be able to cover get as long as 10, 12, 15,000 words, even longer in some cases, more like novellas. Some of the stories that I did cover on Short Story Sundays are like 100 pages long, actual novellas, things like Chest Story and The Sandman. Sandman's not quite that long, but it's still more novella length than it is short story length. Reading longer stories like this would be exceptionally difficult as a narrating process for me, and probably wouldn't have been that enjoyable. So I decided to scrap that idea for Short Story Sundays. But then I was like, okay, well, what can I do with Short Story Sundays that's still different from my typical review format from the book binge, but is still kind of engaging, still gives people a reason to watch it? I was like, okay, well, let's make these slightly more analytical. Let's kind of summarize the story a little bit, read the story, get an idea of what's going on, research a little bit if I feel like I need to, or if I feel like I want to go a little bit deeper into certain things on it, then basically summarize the story, what happens, and then some of my thoughts on that, whether that's analyzing different aspects of it or just giving my reaction in different cases, because some stories are pretty plain and simple, so a simple reaction is all I could really give. For example, other stories like The Sandman are analytical in ways that I feel like most of that video was just me kind of rambling about my interpretations of stuff that were probably wrong. So this was kind of the idea going forward. I was like, okay, this idea would work, and it would allow me to do a couple different things with the editing, to see how much I enjoy doing specific types of editing. That I didn't really get too advanced with it The first couple videos I enjoyed doing what I was doing, but then the more that time went on with the editing the videos, I was like, I don't really enjoy editing videos this way. It's a little bit too active, and I don't know how to change it or improve it. Was the main problem that I was running into. I didn't know how to evolve Short Story Sundays or how to improve it, especially in a way that I was personally satisfied with. This is getting into basically the primary reason why I decided to discontinue the series, is because I wasn't really enjoying making the videos for a couple of different reasons. I enjoyed reading the stories. Sometimes the story I picked out was like, okay, how am I even supposed to talk about this on the channel? How am I going to do this? I've already decided that this would be the next story, so I got to figure out some way to do it, but how am I going to do that? So I had to kind of think outside the box a little bit, which for me is pretty difficult, and for other people probably won't even seem like thinking outside the box. But sometimes developing the notes to make these videos, just writing down the notes, how to talk about the stories in the way that I did, was really difficult to do after a while. I was like, I don't really enjoy making these notes, not really my style of video content. I just don't enjoy doing like summaries of the books in a note-taken session like this. I do reading diaries sometimes, which is basically that sort of thing, but it's also a little bit different. Those are specifically geared towards reaction as opposed to analysis. Trying to do the note-taking to do this kind of stuff with an analysis focus was really difficult, especially since plenty of the stories doing an analysis didn't really work in the way that I was trying to do them. So this created a barrier for me. I was like, okay, halfway through the series as it currently exists, I was starting to kind of lose that little bit of passion that I had for the series. Even though in the latter half, most of those stories that I read, I really liked those stories, but making the videos for them, I didn't really enjoy. So that was kind of the dichotomy. I'm like, okay, well, reading the short stories isn't the problem. It's a little time consuming. It takes time out of my reading time every month to read at least 2, sometimes 3 stories a month because of the bi-weekly format, filling in the gaps from the Fortnite on the Isle videos. Something about this isn't clicking for me in terms of making the videos. So you have the aspect of actually making them themselves, both in the pre-production with the note-taking, but also in the recording. I was very uncomfortable with the first couple of videos in the recording process, but then when it came to editing, I was like, okay, I actually don't mind the way this turned out. The further things went along, I got better at recording the videos that way, but discovered that I wasn't really enjoying the videos being that way, for the same reason of the editing. Like I said, the later that I got in the series, the editing got to a point where it's like, I don't really know how to actually make this work better. I don't know how to improve this. The first couple videos were okay because I was testing something out, but trying to improve it, trying to do that thing without it making me feel like I'm making a crappy video the entire time. I genuinely dislike probably half of the Short Story Sunday videos out there. I don't like how half of them turned out. That became a barrier as well. So now you have 2 barriers here. The third barrier came in just the simple matter of how much time it took to make the videos, both like I was hinting at just a little bit ago or mentioned. The reading of the story itself took away from some of the reading time of other stuff, especially if they were like novellas, so I had to plan them into my reading schedule in very specific ways, and sometimes that didn't feel rewarding. Certain of those stories I didn't enjoy reading because like I felt like I was forcing myself to read them as opposed to reading them because I wanted to. This motivated the initial change to Short Story Sundays that was going to happen. We'll get into that a little bit later in the series, but it became a matter of, okay, well, the stories that I'm reading aren't necessarily the stories that I want to be reading, but how am I supposed to know that in one way or another beforehand? That makes it a little more complicated. So if I make a video every other week on a short story, and it's only for the stories that I feel like are really worth covering, the ones that turn into videos that I'm actually happy with, it's hard to do that without actually reading the stories and enjoying them and having that sort of aspect to kind of dig into to make a video on if I haven't read them. Like I said, I don't know if that sentence made any sense. I kind of lost my way through half of it. I apologize for that. The point is that if I've read a story and I decide I don't really want to do Short Story Sundays on this, well, in the case of what I was doing, I've already promised that story, so I kind of have to cover it anyway. But in the case of even if I only decided to make videos on the ones that I liked, well, then it becomes, in my mind, in that situation, a waste of time to have read that story. Which really, it's not a waste of time, but it feels that way if the point of reading the story was to make a potential video on it. And that kind of thinking made it hard to want to read the stories. And then there's the aspect of the time consumption of the notes, the pre-production, the recording, most especially the editing. Editing one of those Short Story Sunday videos, even if it was only 4 minutes long, took about as long to edit as a 30-minute long book binge episode. And there's some good things about that, there's some bad things. Part of that was because the editing was slightly more interesting. There was a little bit more going on. It wasn't me just watching it and make sure there wasn't anything to cut out and then just cutting out the random thing to cut out. It was because I was trying to do something with the footage. And like I said, I wasn't really happy with how most of the Short Story Sunday videos turned out. And these days, like, I'm not the happiest with the book binge. Like, they're fine, they're suitable, but I want to try to do something slightly better. I want to do something sort of in between the two types of videos, and that's not to say they're drastically different in their editing style, but there's enough different that I want to improve the book binge without going far enough that I don't enjoy doing that aspect of the editing. So this is something that I want to dial in a little over time and maybe improve the book binge with in 2025 a little bit. As opposed to have this one video series that's a little bit more annoying and tedious to edit. It got to the point where it was tedious more than it was enjoyable. And it's not even because it was particularly difficult, it was just tedious. So I stopped enjoying editing the videos as well. And how much time it took, like I said, it's a lot of extra time considering the length of the videos. It was like, okay, well then I got really lazy with the editing of it. And that kind of destroys motivation. So Short Story Sundays became this kind of thing where it was like the butt end of my channel. I sort of enjoyed doing them. I was happy I started doing them. I am still happy I did what I did with them, but I wasn't enjoying them as much anymore. It got to be about May or June, when a friend of mine, Rumo, the one who recommended The Sandman as the last story that I covered, I was talking with her about this, and I kind of came to a decision. I'm like, I don't know if I really want to do this series indefinitely. In fact, I'm pretty certain I do not want to continue Short Story Sundays indefinitely. She was like, okay, yeah, if you don't enjoy making the videos, you shouldn't make the videos. I mean, there are people who have enjoyed some of the videos, and ironically enough, one of the motivators influencing this was the reception of the videos. We'll get into this aspect a little bit later as well. The last couple of them have actually done pretty good, which makes me almost feel guilty for discontinuing the series, which is why I'm offering this explanation. It's just a matter of, she told me, yeah, if you're not enjoying doing it, don't do it anymore. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And I've been trying to tell myself this. It's not been working, but you encouraging me has made me decide, okay, well, I'm not going to do this indefinitely anymore. At that point was when I made the decision to make the series end in 2025. So this is where we get a little bit into the more analytical side of things. The way that the analytics on my channel has been influenced by Short Story Sundays actually hasn't changed that much. It hasn't been a downward trajectory of anything. It hasn't hurt my channel's analytics at all. So that's not the complaint I'm going to make. And I'm not even going to complain too much that the Short Story Sunday videos that came out, for the most part, didn't do too well, because it's not really a surprise they didn't do too well. They're a new series on the channel that people didn't necessarily subscribe for in most cases, so it's a matter of letting it permeate the atmosphere a little bit until people start to check it out. So I wasn't really upset about the early videos doing actually really poorly for the first few episodes. It was an experiment, so that's why I continued running it. But at first it seemed like it wasn't going to do anything. It wasn't going to push the needle. Then a few more episodes came out and they started to do a little better. I'm like, okay, this is good. The analytics on the channel are perfectly fine. Short Story Sundays isn't hurting my channel, even if it's not necessarily doing anything on its own. The early episodes also are comprised of a lot of stories that aren't very well known. You have stories like Metzengerstein by Edgar Allan Poe, which surprisingly actually has quite a reception. That video did not actually do that poorly, all things considered. But like The Duc de l'Omelette by Edgar Allan Poe, ironically it's a lot of Poe stories. A Tale of Jerusalem by Poe. You have A Voice in the Night by William Hope Hodgson, who's not like a super well-known author these days anymore. You have like The Whole Town Sleeping by Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury's a popular author, but I don't think very many people know very many of his short stories these days that aren't like The Martian Chronicles, which are kind of their own thing. They're a conceptual binding of stories, as opposed, they're just as much a novel as they are a collection of short stories, is my understanding of them. So you have me covering a bunch of stories that aren't super well known and that people aren't really going to search for. So that's part of the reason why the analytics wasn't really worrying me as well. I was like, okay, well, it's no surprise that nobody's clicking on a video about The Duc de l'Omelette by Edgar Allan Poe. Like, what even is that? You know, stories that people probably have never heard of. Even H.P. Lovecraft, a couple of the early stories I did there, like The Beast in the Cave, The Alchemist, The Tomb. These maybe aren't necessarily the most popular stories that he's ever written, so the reception is going to be a little bit varied and a little bit more variable in that case. That is basically what I expected things to turn out, so I wasn't worried about it. So coming back around to how does analytics affect this, part of the reason I feel guilty now about discontinuing Short Story Sundays is because the last couple of videos have actually done pretty good, and a lot of this is because they're Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft, which is a very popular story. It's one of his most well-known stories, so the fact that that is still one of the best received videos for the first day in terms of view count, especially for the series. I think it's probably #1 in the entire Short Story Sunday series that I covered. I was like, oh yeah, maybe this was a bad decision. And then The Sandman was kind of the same way. The Sandman also has a pretty good decision because that's a very well-known story. I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting, but this was a little bit of the aftermath. I decided I'm going to discontinue Short Story Sundays at the end of 2024, basically after a year of the series running. So the back half, because the first half was made of a lot of stories that people probably haven't read or heard of, the back half is going to be covered a little bit more in terms of what people have heard of or stories that I actually want to read. So these were going to be stories like, say, The Call of Cthulhu by Lovecraft, a very well-known story, even though it is sort of more of a novella. Or at least it's like a novelette. At the very least, it's a novelette more than it is a short story. I was going to cover The Black Cat and The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, so stories that were a little bit more well-known or by some of these authors, right? And then, like I said, it was while I was editing The Sandman that I decided I'm not going to do that at all. I'm just not going to read those stories and cover them on Short Story Sundays because I just don't enjoy making the videos anymore. So I'm just going to discontinue it here. So I think that, like, some people are probably going to get the idea that analytics is why I discontinued Short Story Sundays. It isn't really. If I were to have continued through the end of the year, if I was worried about the analytics part of it specifically to determine whether I was going to discontinue it or not, I would have continued it going with some of these more popular stories, these most well-known stories like Mask of the Red Death I also would have been covering as well. These would have definitely probably performed to a degree that I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do it indefinitely as long as I'm covering some of these stories that are going to do well. But the thing is, that doesn't motivate my channel. I don't make the decisions that I make on my channel specifically for the views or for really any of the analytics in general. It was a little bit of the decision with Short Story Sundays. So I was like, they're not moving the needle enough on the channel to fully justify the amount of time and energy I'm putting into making the videos when I want to be doing other stuff. And that is the key phrase here, when I want to be doing other stuff. I enjoyed Short Story Sundays at the start for what it was, but the more months I continued on, I realized that I wasn't enjoying making the videos, and this was the main thing. But the other thing was, I want to be making other videos. Over the course of this year, I've made how many scripted videos on my second channel? Maybe 3, 4, I guess, technically, but one of those I didn't write or do anything like that this year. It's something that I wrote a little over a year ago and just recorded this year after discontinuing Short Story Sundays. The amount of videos that I worked on and actually put out on the second channel this year, let me actually just pull up my second channel and look. I'm pretty sure it was just the year-end stuff, so my top games and my top, like, music and stuff like that. Okay, so I misremembered. There's 5 videos, I believe. 6. There's 6 videos. 6 scripted videos that I did on the second channel this year. 2 of those were after I'd already decided to discontinue Short Story Sundays. 4 of them were while I was actively doing it. One of those was a really short album review. One of those was a longer album review, but but one that I decided to cover because I cared enough about that band. And then, like I said, the 2023 Album of the Year list and the 2023 Game of the Year list. These were the 4 videos that came out. But even all of those videos came out much later than I wanted them to. The first album review came out basically right when it needed to because it was a pretty short video. It wasn't that hard to make. The other album review also came out in a decently timely manner, in my opinion. But the top 10 albums and EPs was like 2 weeks late. It seemed like it was a little bit later than it needed to be. It took about 2 weeks for it to come out after the album review that preceded it. It was supposed to come out the next week. So that took a week delay. The next album review came out 1 week after the Album of the Year video. So that was a pretty timely, that was okay. Then it took an extra 2 weeks as well for the Game of the Year video to come out in March. The Game of the Year and Album of the Year videos were supposed to come out both in February at the latest, and I would have actually preferred for them to be ready enough for January. I spent January basically writing those and getting them ready, if I remember correctly, and then February was going to be making them and getting them out, which I almost met, but it took a while. Compare this to 2023, in which I wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 album reviews. Well, 5 album reviews and 1 discography ranking. And that was over several months, though. That was over like 7 months, right? So it took a long time to make those videos, but that's not because it took too long to make the videos themselves. It was because those just happened to be when the albums came out. In fact, there was a point where I released 2 of those videos in 2 weeks, just a couple weeks after making a big discography ranking, because that's when the material for those videos happened to come out. Not to talk too much longer about the second channel, but a lot of what I enjoy doing about the second channel is I enjoy scripting content. This is why I do written book reviews on Goodreads now. This year I try to put more time and focus into those, is because I enjoy doing that. But I also enjoy doing it for stuff that isn't books. That's what the second channel is for non-book related stuff. So writing those scripted reviews, recording those, making those videos was something that I enjoyed doing, something that I was still doing at the beginning of the year. It came to be a problem when Short Story Sundays was the thing I was focusing on, and I was unable to make any content for the second channel for forever, to the point that I couldn't even really find the time most of the time to edit the Let's Play videos for the second channel, the sort of, you know, passive content over there, when I'm able to record and edit several of those episodes of Let's Plays and then just put them over there. That's kind of a thing that I do. The scripted content is what I actively put time into solely as a passion project type of thing. I would like to be able to do those more often. I wanted to be able to do those more often. This is a lot of what influenced my decision to discontinue Short Story Sundays in the first place. I was saying, like, I want to be able to make other types of videos. I want to make other stuff. I want to go back to writing scripted content for the second channel. And none of it really panned out because I was spending too many hours reading a short story, making the notes for it, recording it, and then editing it. And then you would not believe how much time it takes half the time. For some of these stories, especially the lesser known ones, finding some sort of artwork or something that is relevant, or specifically if it's fan art, because I wanted to try to find fan art stuff so that I could credit and link to fan art pages if somebody had made fan art for a specific story. But it became a problem when finding any form of artwork that was applicable to the stories that I enjoyed enough to make a thumbnail for it was also taking hours. It was also taking hours to find the story in which to be able to link, plus the thumbnail art. Making the thumbnail wasn't super hard once I had found the art, but doing all of that stuff, the descriptions, the thumbnails and stuff like that, also took a few hours for most videos. So I don't know if I have an average of like how much time each video took to take, but it was altogether too long. It was enough hours that I was unable for several months to write or do anything for the second channel. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up my Todoist app, my to-do list app, because it's called Todoist, you know, whole thing that's going on. It doesn't really matter. The point is, I'm going to pull up this app and give you some of the list of videos that I wanted to be able to make for the second channel that I still want to, even though they'd be a little bit less relevant, all things considered. Let's take a look at the blogs that I wanted to write, videos that I wanted to make for the second channel that I have not had time to do this year so far. Just this year that I planned to make this year, that Short Story Sundays basically prevented me from doing because of how much time it took to make those videos. North Lane's Mirror's Edge is not my cup of tea, and I really wish it was, so a review for the recent EP that North Lane released. Orbit Culture's The Forgotten is the perfect starting point for prospective fans. This EP released late last year, actually, so it was a 2023 thing. It came out, not too long after I made my Orbit Culture discography ranking, so I didn't miss this video necessarily. I sort of wanted to make it back then when it released, but I wasn't sure. So it was actually this year, around the time that I was going to review Mirror's Edge, that I was going to review The Forgotten, actually go back and write a review for it. I planned to do that. I still haven't made that video. I'm probably going to make that video here pretty soon, because by the time this video comes out, I'll have like just barely experience, probably yesterday actually, because it's probably coming on August 25th. So 24th of August, I'm going to a Orbit Culture concert, or at least theoretically I'm going to an Orbit Culture concert. So there's the chance that I'll be able to make this video very soon now and it still be sort of relevant because I went to a concert. But then I also wanted to make an album review for The Ghosts Inside's Searching for Solace, their recent album, because I really enjoyed that album, felt like it was going to be worth making a video for it. Also, in the past few months, I had the ideas of making a couple more discography rankings. One of those, recently I just recorded the old discography ranking that I wrote for Periphery, and at the end of that I mentioned doing a Coheed and Cambria discography ranking. I was actually planning to go back and do that earlier this year. I was planning to do a Sleep Token discography ranking earlier this year on account of Take Me Back to Eden's first year anniversary. I wanted to do an all Avenged Sevenfold albums ranking, so a discography ranking for Avenged Sevenfold, because they had a new album come out last year, and it would have been an old video that I actually wanted to make way a long time ago on this channel originally, something totally different, a different story for a different day. I wanted to make that video. And then I also had the idea of doing an Insomnium discography ranking, because they recently released another EP as well. They released an album and an EP, just like Orbit Culture released an album and an EP in 2023. So I went back and was like, okay, I want to do a discography ranking for that. These were 7 videos that I wanted to make, and I actually planned to make all 7 of these this year. Guess how many of those 7 videos are written? 0. None of those videos are written because I was spending too much time working on Short Story Sundays. And I know I've had a little bit of time since I finished working on Short Story Sundays since then, in which I could have theoretically written these. I've been working on other projects as well. I wrote the 21 Pilots discography ranking when their album Clancy came out. That was something I decided to do because I listened to their full discography after the album came out. I'm like, okay, well, I wasn't actually planning to make a 21 Pilots discography ranking. Let's do it. I was able to do it because I wasn't having to work on Short Story Sundays. Similar story with finally doing the Periphery discography ranking. You want to know how early I planned to record that video? I was going to record it in February when I did, basically the other videos that came out on this channel. The 4 of the 6 videos that came out on the second channel, the scripted content, they came out last Monday of January through the first Monday of March. That video, the Periphery one, was supposed to be recorded and edited and uploaded in February, or at least at the very latest in March, after the Game of the Year video came out. There was a few months where I never found the time, or never made the time to record and edit that video because I was too busy with Short Story Sunday. So it's kind of a similar story. Basically, this was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. There were various things kind of piling on top of each other with Short Story Sundays that made it a little bit harder for me to make those videos and to want to make those videos. It was very time consuming to read the stories. That it is what it is. I'm glad to have read the stories, but it was a factor in there. The amount of time it took to do pre-production, make the notes for those videos, and also prepare some of the other stuff like the description and thumbnail and stuff like that, because I often did those before I actually made the videos, like before I recorded the videos, because I knew I was going to be making the videos on that stuff anyway. So there's some pre-production stuff there. There's the recording and the actual editing and all of that fancy jargon and whatnot. The amount of time that it took to make the videos, there was a little bit of the analytics in there because they weren't necessarily doing enough to push the envelope. It wasn't a deciding factor, but it was a factor that kind of existed there. There was the fact that I wasn't really enjoying making the videos anymore, and it was most especially the fact that I wasn't getting to make other videos that I did actually enjoy making and that I did want to make on the second channel. All these things coalesced and combined into a problem of, I don't think I want to continue Short Story Sundays. Like I said, when I was discussing with Rumo about this decision, she was supportive of the idea of me only continuing through 2025, and I actually have a list of the stories that I was going to read for the remainder of the year. There was, I think, 11 lists remaining. Let's see if I can even find it. Where even is it? There it is. Remaining short stories for Short Story Sundays. So it was going to be episodes 16 through 26, so 11 more episodes of the series to go through the rest of the year. I decided on the stories and had the order out, which ones were going to be coming out in which month. In August, I was going to do The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe and The Nameless City by H.P. Lovecraft. In September, I was going to cover The Sound of Summer Running by Ray Bradbury and The Rats in the Walls by H.P. Lovecraft. In October, I was going to cover The White Silence by Jack London and The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. In November, I was going to cover The Goddess of Death by William Hope Hodgson and From Beyond by H.P. Lovecraft. And then in December, I was going to cover The Raid by Leo Tolstoy, The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, and The Call of Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft, with those last two basically being the send-off for the series, with two big, very popular short stories, arguably the most popular from each of their respective authors. So I was actually being relatively methodical. I was covering at least one more short story from all of the authors that I had covered on Short Story Sundays up to that point, except for Stefan Zweig and then E.T.A. Hodgson. So Ray Bradbury, Jack London, William Hope Hodgson, and Leo Tolstoy as authors who I plan to have as like relative mainstays to one degree or another, and then Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft with multiple, because those were the ones I had covered the most and the ones that I had planned to cover the most in the first place. The reasons essentially that I started Short Story Sundays, because I wanted to have a reason to read short stories like Edgar Allan Poe's and H.P. Lovecraft's. So I had the schedule planned out. I was going to make them. And then I was editing the video for The Sandman and realized just how little I was enjoying editing that video. It was a long one, relatively speaking, so it took a really long time to edit that video, actually. And then I was like, I don't enjoy this. I'm not going to do it anymore. So the outro of that video actually has me doing an explanation of, I'm going to discontinue Short Story Sundays come 2025 for this reason. When I recorded that video, I had decided on that. I'm going to do it for this reason. And it was unusable. That ending was unusable because I was said, I'm going to discontinue in 2025. I have 11 more stories that I'm going to cover, I think. And that's going to be the end of it. So it's going to continue strong through the rest of the year. And then it'll be done. This 2024 episode of Short Story Sundays. Obviously, things didn't turn out that way. In that outro as well, I also included, you know, the typical ending of those videos. Next week, I'm going to cover The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe, one of my favorite short stories, and one of the reasons that I am actually, you know, really wanting to read all of Edgar Allan Poe's material. I hope to see you all there, that whole routine. I did that. And when I was editing, I had come to the decision, I basically realized just how little I was enjoying making the video, and I cut the entire outro. It was like 2 minutes. I cut the entire outro and just made the end of Short Story Sundays. Instead of the next story with the outro, the outro was just the end of Short Story Sundays, and that was it. And the thing that feels almost the worst about it is I didn't feel bad about doing it either. There are parts of me that wonder about having continued it, but really the decision comes down to I didn't want to make the videos anymore, and I didn't enjoy making the videos anymore. Instead, I want to still read short stories every now and again, but cover them somewhere else, whether that be like a Thursday episode of the Book Bench reviewing a short story or a handful of short stories, or doing something on the Book Bench with short story stuff, or maybe, you know, just every quarter or something reading, say, 5 short stories, or maybe even less than that, because then I'd be reading a similar amount of short stories as I was before. I don't know. I haven't come to a decision. I have ideas of reading short stories and covering them in some manner, either on the Book Binge or making a short story Sunday series that isn't the original one, and instead just reviewing 5 or like 3 short stories every quarter or something like that, and then have that be a video that exists on the channel. I don't know. If you have recommendations on how I could cover short stories on the channel that still would kind of work for the type of vibe that I have, the kind of style that I have generally on the Book Bench, let me know, so I kind of have some ideas to toss around, because maybe I'll bring short story Sundays back in 2025, doing something different, not what I was doing before. I don't know yet, but if you have ideas, shout them out to me and I'll see what I can figure out, if I figure out anything with it. But because the primary thing was, yeah, I want to be able to make more videos on the second channel like I was doing before, that was the primary motivator. That's basically what I'm doing. Right now, I'm actually not making any videos for the second channel right now, because all of my review writing efforts are going into a couple of reviews for the main channel. Actually, I'm going to make a couple of my Goodreads reviews on the main channel, because I just cannot find a way to cover the books that I'm writing reviews for on Goodreads without them being the reviews from Goodreads. So I'm just going to record those as voiceovers and make those the reviews on the channel. That is the degree to which I've been enjoying making scripted / very intentionally written reviews of stuff, whether that be the books on Goodreads or the music. And I do want to get back to actually making game reviews on the second channel as well. I don't know what's going to happen with the future, but I wanted to do more stuff with the second channel besides just spending all the extra time on Short Story Sundays. So yeah, that is the very, very, very long explanation, essentially, of why I decided to discontinue Short Story Sundays, explained to the best of my ability, and I hope this video made sense. I hope I didn't forget any of the major points, because there probably are a couple things that influenced my decision that I just don't remember right now at the moment, which would be unfortunate, but I really tried to put it into perspective and say this is why. It wasn't just because the videos weren't getting a whole lot of attention, as some of those videos did, especially the last couple and the first one. But you know, some of that had some influence, but most of it was creative decisions. I wasn't being creatively satisfied by Short Story Sundays to the degree that I needed them to be creatively satisfied to justify creating them, because I can make videos that I don't like particularly love, because like the Book Binge is a staple of the channel. That is the thing that the channel is centered around. But even the Book Binge, I'm like, that's not my favorite thing in the world. I could make this a little better. I don't love the Book Binge episodes most of the time, but I don't necessarily have to, because I am creatively satisfied by creating the videos nonetheless. Most of my dissatisfaction that comes from those videos is sometimes in the way that I structure some of the videos, depending on what they are, like some of the auxiliary Thursday episodes. And sometimes it's just with the edits. I want to be able to do a little bit more with the edits to make them slightly more interesting, some of those videos that way. So things that I kind of toss around in my head in the background, but mostly the creative fulfillment that I get from the Book Binge is from actually covering topics, actually covering the books. I like my spoiler-free review format, because all my reviews are spoiler-free for the most part. Basically all of them are. And even the ones that have spoiler sections, like, they're very well delineated. That's not the point of the review. It's more like a reaction to specific stuff in it. The point is that I enjoy my format for the Book Binge, so I'm creatively fulfilled making those videos, because I just enjoy talking about the books. I enjoy talking about what I talk about over there. I enjoy making those videos solely for recording them, if for nothing else. So even though I'm not fully satisfied with the editing, for example, I'm satisfied with the recording. Short Story Sundays was a different issue, where I was not really creatively satisfied by any aspect of them. I discovered and this was a problem with the first few episodes, I wasn't really sure how to talk about them. I wasn't sure how to structure them. I wasn't sure what manner of spoiler content or summarization or whatever to include and talk about. And I feel like the first few episodes were actually a lot better on that front, even though they didn't have as much content as I feel like they needed to, like Metzengerstein. Bad episode, because it does not talk about as much as it needs to. Like, to analyze Metzengerstein, that video needed to be twice as long as it is. And that's a me problem, because I just didn't include any of that content in the video. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't realize that at the time until a friend of mine, Omar, who had read the story, was kind of talking with me in the comments on that video. I was like, oh yeah, I realized like this video just did not cover half of what it needed to. So that influenced the way that I was starting to cover some of the future episodes. But then like I just lost my way. I don't know what happened, that I wasn't covering those stories the way that I felt like I needed to be. So even my notes and the recording, regardless of how much time it took, because the early episodes actually took a lot of time to record. Like, that first episode is 4 minutes long. I think that recording is 25 minutes long, because of how rough it was trying to figure out something that worked. So there was that element, but by the end I was actually getting pretty good at that format, but I wasn't happy with the format. I was not happy with the way the videos turned out at all. Not fully because of the editing is part of it, but the videos themselves I was not happy with. So I just, when it comes right down to it, what I've been trying to say this whole time, I was not creatively satisfied or fulfilled by Short Story Sundays to the degree that I felt like they were worth making. The analytics had a little bit to do with it, but not very much, actually. It was mostly the creative satisfaction side of things. So that is why I discontinued Short Story Sundays. This was a long video. I'm sorry for how long it was. Like I said, I was trying not to ramble too much, but I feel like I basically got out what I wanted to say. If you were a fan of Short Story Sundays, I'm sorry for discontinuing it. I do feel bad for doing so. I didn't necessarily want to discontinue Short Story Sundays, but it needed to happen. It wasn't driving me. It was taking too much time away from projects that I really wanted to do instead. So that's that, I guess. Like I said, if you have any ideas for how I could cover short stories on the book binge or something like that, in some manner that would be that you would enjoy seeing, for example, shout those ideas out to me so I can come up with some way to do that, so that I can get back to reading some more of the short stories, because I enjoyed some of those stories a lot. I want to get back to reading some of those, but I don't want to get back into reading a lot of them yet until I have a more specific way to cover them. I don't have to cover everything I read on the channel, but I want to cover a lot of it, and short stories is one of those things that is kind of undercovered on BookTube, so I want to fill a niche for people who enjoy short stories. That would be kind of cool to do. It would be really cool to do. I just want to be able to do it in a way that I find fulfilling and satisfying enough to do them. So if you have those ideas, please shout those out to me in the comments below, or if you have me friended on Discord or something like that, send me a DM, send me a message somewhere, let me know, like genuinely let me know how I could do that, and I'll run some more ideas through my head and see if I can't figure some way to reconcile not having Short Story Sundays on the channel anymore. But that is going to be it for this video. I've talked way more than I needed to. Thank you for watching this video and really listening to my explanation. If you did, if you stuck through this, you're a real one, because this video is way longer than it needs to be. Well, it's just as long as it needs to be, basically, by the time I'm done editing it, but it's way longer than it has any right to be. That is the truth, though. But thank you for watching, and I appreciate everybody who watches. So if you're interested in checking out something else on the channel, or if you want to shout out recommendations for how to cover short stories so that I can do those on the book binge or something like that, and give you a reason to check out some more videos on the channel, like I said, you can stick around if you want. You don't have to, though, but I appreciate you watching nonetheless. I'll be back in the next video, whatever that may be.